Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Weekly is normally me, Jeremiah Pricer, and John Einreinhofer. But this week, Jeremiah and John both have been busy, so we've had a couple special shows. Last night we had James Hagler, son of Marvin Hagler, on to talk about his promotional company. You can check that out on thegruelingtruth.net. And tonight we have a special guest, the wife of ex-former heavyweight champion of the world, Tommy Morrison. Help me welcome to the show, Trisha Morrison. How you doing, Trisha?
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much.
All right, so let's go back. Tommy Morrison was an excellent heavyweight back in the 90s, beat George Foreman to win the WBO heavyweight championship. A few years later, though, of course, from what everybody sees, especially when you watch ESPN's 30 for 30, he, of course, was diagnosed with AIDS, had to stop boxing. There's been a lot of rumors out there that are just, for a matter of a better word, they're just false and they're lies. And tonight, we're going to let Tricia clear some of those up. And in 3 days, 2 or 3 days, the United States Supreme Court justices will be discussing whether to grant Tommy's petition for rehearing on a case that was filed in federal court in 2014 in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, can you tell us, Tricia, a little bit when and why this case was filed?
Yes. Mike, thanks for having me on the show. It was filed on July 24th, 2014, because Tommy's final diagnosis on his post-mortem report confirmed he had no HIV and no AIDS diseases were diagnosed after 5 months of extensive testing, and because no one could tell me who was responsible for a diagnosis made in 1996 by the Nevada Commission. I even contacted ESPN to tell me what source they had for their article of August 23rd, 2013, and they basically told me to cease and desist and that they did not have to disclose anything.
So who are the defendants and what was each of their involvement in this case?
Well, there are 5 named defendants. Quest Diagnostics, they are the ones that received the blood and use their testing equipment and their employees to process a test. They are the ones that decide which test to buy and sell to the physicians. The next defendant is Dr. John Hyatt. He worked for Quest Diagnostics in 1996, and I found his name because I read the media reporting that he was the renowned physician and pathologist for Quest that had reviewed the original test results. And then we've got the Nevada State Athletic Commission that had immediately, indefinitely, worldwide suspended Tommy from boxing on February 10th, 1996. And then there's Mark Ratner that delivered the diagnosis to a third party, not a physician, to tell Tommy he had HIV. And then we've got Dr. Margaret Goodman that maliciously was instrumental in ruining Tommy's comeback in 2006, 2007.
All right, so I know you've done a ton of research over this. I know you've sent some of it to me. I've seen some of it. You want to explain to the listeners exactly what you did uncover in these last 4 or 5 years?
Yep, it's been very interesting, Mike. First of all, with Quest Diagnostics, that their lab report that they send out, that the commission says they require, is not a diagnosis of any disease, not even HIV. That the tests do not detect the whole virus, which is what is needed to confirm that anyone is infectious. That they made a phone call on February 10, 1996, direct to the commission without informing the physician, that they claim someone is infectious without knowing that person's actual patient history and without doing a test confirming that the person is actually infectious, that they falsified a document they produced nearly 20 years later with the name of a physician that never ordered nor diagnosed Tommy with HIV, that they lied about Tommy being HIV positive in 1989 without any blood evidence. So that's Quest. Then Hyatt, that he's not and never was a licensed physician nor a licensed pathologist, that he was not the person that had viewed Tommy's original results, that he has been using MD in his credentials to the media and in government health meetings in Nevada. So that's that next defendant. Then we've got the Nevada State Athletic Commission that in 1996, in their very own rule book, never required any HIV testing. That in order to make it a rule, you have to have what's called an open meeting to discuss and present scientific information as to whether a lab report is confirmation that someone is infectious in the ring and whether the tests confirm that. This was never done, Mike, in 1996, nor even today in 2018. That they lied about a 1989 HIV diagnosis to the courts without any evidence other than media reporting. And then we've got Mark Ratner, that he's not a physician and cannot deliver a diagnosis of any disease to a third party that is not even licensed for the fight, nor listed on the medical release form that they have to sign. And then you've got Dr. Margaret Goodman, who says she knows nothing about the testing, and this is all under oath, and was never Tommy's physician, and also she had no right to go to the media with false, malicious health information without a signed HIPAA form. Nor did she have the right to say that Hyatt was a renowned physician and pathologist when he was not. So that's what's been uncovered amongst a whole bunch of other stuff, but that took a while to uncover.
All right, so what you're saying is when Tommy tested positive in 1996, it wasn't even a test that he had to take. It's what boxers weren't necessarily mandated to take that test?
Right, correct. It's not in the rule book.
So,
and that actually, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So what was the reason that they tested Tommy for HIV?
I don't know. I've no idea.
Was it because of the rumors about 1989 or something? I mean, at some point somebody had to say something, I would think, because it doesn't make any sense. Somebody had to,
yeah.
Yeah.
Nope, it doesn't make any sense at all whatsoever. It's not in the rule book, and in fact, if you look at the rules, and you can pull them up, they're part of the court record, and you can even go to the Supreme Court Library in Nevada, and you can pull up the regulation, the health regulation for 1996. He passed what the regulation required, and the regulation did not require HIV testing in 1996. So I don't know why they required that of him, or whether they enforced that without going through the proper procedures. They've yet to answer that question in court.
Well, I can't wait till they do, because I'd like to hear what the answer is. All right, so let's talk about the process. You started off federal court in Vegas, to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco, to the U.S. Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. What's that process been like for you?
Yeah, it's been a real interesting process, and it's definitely a process that you have to follow when you file a lawsuit. First thing is you file in Nevada, which is where all the defendants are, which is where it happened. And then when you get dismissed, you file in the Court of Appeals, which is in San Francisco at the Ninth Circuit, which is a pretty tough court. When you get dismissed there, you then file in the U.S. Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the nation. And each court has their own way of filing. It has to be a certain font size. It has to be a certain size of paper or booklet format. You cannot make any mistakes in the way the documents need to be filed. And it takes a lot of research to do that. Not one of my documents, which is over 300 in the lower courts, were ever late or deficient. There are filing fees that you have to pay, printing costs and mailing costs. So it's a process, and you've got timelines that you have to stay on top of.
All right, so I know that you've had a lot of harassment. You've had to put up with a lot of just basically, as they say, fake news from media articles, videos, witness harassment, character assassination. You want to talk a little bit about those things and just exactly what you and others have had to go through because of this?
Sure, yeah. I'm very open about it. First of all, when you're filing a kind of lawsuit like this, first come the death threats. And they were directed at me and also my expert rebuttal witness as well. And then comes the character assassination to make you look like a real idiot. So that's what happens first. Then it continues throughout as the pressure builds up against the defendants and as more claims are confirmed and more evidence is brought out. They call you unintelligent and try and intimidate you by asking for extensions of time and filing frivolous motions against you. Then you get the odd dozen of keyboard and Twitter medical opinions by people that have never met Tommy and never saw his blood and do not even know the story other than what's in the media. And then you've got Wikipedia and random video makers that want to portray their part of the story. And then on the other side, you get a whole army of real, true Tommy fans that go out and fight for him along with me once they see the evidence for themselves, which is kind of heartwarming and makes up for all the death threats and character assassination.
Yeah, because like myself, I mean, I love Tommy. He was one of my favorite fighters. And the thing is, when all this happened, I didn't even know about you up until about 2 years ago. So I just took everything I saw as being the truth. And then you were on the Ringside Boxing Show with Dennis and John on the GrillingTruth.net. And I had the chance to talk to you off air a few times. And then when I talk to people, especially after we put the article up, we get a lot of people, why are you putting Trisha Morrison on there? She'll destroy your credibility because she's crazy. And I got these messages so many times. And anybody that knows me, as soon as I find out about somebody like that, I don't trust anybody's opinion of anybody else until I talk to them myself. And I've talked to you on numerous occasions. I don't think you're crazy. And the thing that really stood out to me in all of this was how he wasn't even supposed to be tested in 1996. And I think that if we found the root of why they tested him in 1996, you would probably find why all this happened to begin with.
Right, that's right, yeah. And you know, the defendants have not answered that. In fact, they filed a waiver in the U.S. Supreme Court, basically not answering anything or disputing anything that I filed. So they kind of got out of that, yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the mugshot of 2011. There's been a lot of crap on the internet about that. Why was Tommy in jail?
Yeah, there has been a lot of crap on that. That mugshot that's gone viral, that everybody loves to put up, was taken in September 2011. A sting operation took place in Tennessee. Tommy was outside Walmart in Tennessee in his car, and a woman came up to him and said she needed a ride to the courthouse, and she was going to be late, and her ride did not show up. So before he knew it, she had jumped in his car. She gave him directions to the courthouse, which was just minutes away. When they got there, she jumped out quickly out of the car, and 5 cop cars surrounded him and told him he had a sealed fugitive warrant of arrest on him. He was taken to jail. When I found out, I got attorneys to try and get him out, but they couldn't because it was a sealed warrant, they said. Even John Gotti Jr. Tried getting him out, but couldn't. Tommy was in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day. He was let out for 1 hour to make a phone call to me. He had a court hearing in Tennessee and arrived in chains around his ankles, and his hands were cuffed. He would be in jail until Kansas either picked him up to extradite him back there, or time would run out if they didn't pick him up and he would be set free, is what we were told. But Kansas came to pick him up on the last day in jail in Tennessee in a private plane. They flew him to Wichita, threw him into a cell with 5 gang members that jumped on him, and he fought back. He's a fighter. He was then separated from them and then immediately put in front of the judge, and that's where that mugshot comes from, is that scene there after over 3 weeks in jail, 23 hours a day. He did not eat. He did not sleep. He did a lot of crying. He lost 20 pounds, did not have any medication given to him. He even traded a pair of socks for a packet of oatmeal. It took a week to get a Bible into his cell. No one would help me bail Tommy out. The sealed warrant was unsealed, and he was charged based on marijuana case from 2010 that had been dropped by the city of Wichita, and a 2006 South Dakota $80 unpaid fine from a grinder considered to be paraphernalia. So based on those two, one which wasn't a charge and one was an unpaid fine, that became a federal offense as far as Tommy Morrison was concerned. During that time that he was in jail, he had complained to me that the side of his chest hurt. And when he finally got bailed out, he came out with a tick bite to the side of his chest. But it didn't end there. Once bailed out on a $50,000 bail, within a span of 3 days, returning back to Tennessee, he was arrested for loitering at Walmart while waiting for his bail bonds guy to come out of the restroom. He was then taken off a Delta flight in Atlanta on drug charges, but when tested was negative. Then the morning after returning home, jailed again for a DUI, which results came back negative. 3 weeks later, he had surgery on his chest for the tick bite, and that's when the Tennessee surgeon left 12 foot of surgical gauze in his chest for a week to rot, causing the beginning of 21 months of sheer hell, Mike. And all that stuff that I just told you, no media has reported on it at all.
I've never heard this. I really haven't. You've sent me a lot of stuff, and I know you sent me, I think, a picture to 12 foot of surgical gauze, which I don't know how a doctor makes a mistake like that, because they don't.
Yeah.
There's a backstory here that we're not getting, and maybe we never will, but I think it is great that you are fighting for Tommy's legacy, because like I said, he was a great fighter, but beyond that, everybody I've ever talked to that interviewed him or were friends with Tommy all talk about what a great guy he was. And I mean, this is just sickening when you hear the actual true story.
Right. That's right. And that's exactly what happened. And yet when I pick up something in the media, it doesn't say any of that. And that was the beginning of 21 months of sheer hell.
All right. So let's go to the mother and the ESPN article in August 2013.
Yeah, that is really disappointing. ESPN were like vultures, even apparently standing outside the hospital in Omaha, Nebraska, as they called and texted me for a story that they were putting out. Tommy's mother, bless her little heart, made a statement that Tommy was in the end stages of AIDS without providing any evidence for this statement for the media article. And there's nothing in the court of law either from the mother showing that he was in the end stages of so-called AIDS. No physician, Mike, had made contact with her, giving her that information. No signed HIPAA form allowing any physician to disclose to her or anyone else other than me information. I gave her daily updates by text and phone calls, and none of the updates were on end-stage AIDS. But ESPN ran with it without even showing any evidence from her that he was so-called end stages of AIDS.
Yeah, and then, of course, we have the alleged drug use and the drugs with Tommy.
Yep. For some reason, everybody seems to want to remember him as he was, right? The drug situation, with regards to HIV meds, Tommy chose not to have HIV meds years and years before he even met me. And in fact, he was allergic to them. They made him sick. They gave him diarrhea. They made him lose weight. He was allergic to what was in those HIV meds. HIV meds do not cure HIV. That's what the doctors say. In fact, Tommy's physicians, after they tested him for any and all the AIDS diseases, did not prescribe him any HIV meds. So that was their call. He didn't have anything for them to want to prescribe HIV medication. As far as the street drugs, which again everybody wants to put out there, meth and this and that, he's very honest about that, Mike. Yes, he took, the real hardcore drugs when he was kicked out of boxing. He said to fill a void is what he said, and he always said that. He surrounded himself with people that gave him drugs. He didn't have to buy them. He was spun out on drugs, and he writes that in his own books. If you're someone who is with or know people that are on drugs, you have a choice. You either walk away or you stand by them. And I chose to stand by Tommy. Anyone that's been down that road, when they finally say to you, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, it's time for them to try rehab, and they know that too. And Tommy did, and he succeeded. It wasn't easy. It was a daily thing. But he would say often, if I can do this, anyone can. And he even counseled adults and kids to stop doing drugs. And that's what he needs to be remembered by. Not how crazy he was in the beginning. Of course, anybody can be crazy, but he turned himself around. So those that continue to harm his legacy, they should never disrespect a boxer in or out of the ring. They are just as human as anyone else, but with a little sprinkle of something special. And it hurts to hear stuff when he gave so much excitement between the ages of 18 and 26, Mike. There's a lot of people that start boxing at 26. Yeah. And he even worked out in the gym twice a day right till the day he got arrested in 2011. So that's the drug situation. People have got to quit saying all the bad stuff and try and remember him for what he, turned his life around to be.
All right, so let's look at the final diagnosis by virologist physicians in September 17, 2013, who overruled the ailing mother diagnosis.
Right, yeah. Well, Tommy's actual final diagnosis was reported a little over 2 weeks after he died. And, of course, he never got to hear it, never got to read his own post-mortem report. But that post-mortem report says no HIV virus was found in him. In fact, the word is retrovirus. That's the scientific word for HIV. And no AIDS diseases were found. So those listeners out there that want to continue to believe in what ESPN reports of what a mother said, who has no expertise in HIV, who did not perform the blood tests, and she never received the phone call from the experts who now, by the way, actually run a crime lab in Omaha, Nebraska. She received a copy of that post-mortem report, and she's in denial herself of the scientific fact that no whole virus of any kind was found in her son. And that's just truly sad that, hopefully she's listening to this. But it is a scientific fact by the AIDS establishment, not by a denialist group of people. The testing out there is for DNA, RNA, and antibodies, and none of those three things are actually contagious. The blood has to have the actual whole virus in order to infect others. No whole virus or any virus was actually found in Tommy, and that is the scientific truth.
That's amazing. Once again, people, just to break down what that means is the final report on Tommy when they did the test showed no HIV virus in him, no AIDS disease. So, but yet right. ESPN still runs with the story that Tommy Morrison had AIDS. I don't know why they do that. It would be nice if the Supreme Court would dig into this so we could actually find out. But when you look at this, it's just it looks funny all over the place. And the admission from the commission was that no diagnosis was made.
Correct. Yep. In court records, and I posted it all over the Facebook page that we have. We all believed what was in the media. We all read what was put out there by ESPN, and then everybody else tags onto ESPN stuff. Even Tommy believed it. But what this case has uncovered, an admission actually by the commission that they did not make a diagnosis of HIV in 1996. That comes directly from them.
Yeah, and then you had the admission from the judge also, who said that tests do not detect the virus.
Yep, that's right. On September 8th, 2016, the case uncovered an admission actually by the judge himself that the test Tommy was given between 1996 and 2013, because all the documents were in front of him, were not detecting the whole virus. And if you don't have the whole virus, you can't make a diagnosis of being infected with HIV. Simple as that.
Now you had the bogus 1989 diagnosis that dismissed the case, and the mother's interview with her ESPN 30 for 30 diagnosis. That audio, I could not get to download so we could play it. I apologize. I'm going to try to, in the next day, though, just put it up and let it stand by itself on thegruelingtruth.net. People can go see that. But Tony Holden, that confirms that he was there. John Brownie's so-called manager also said in an email today that I did not know what they were talking about. So stop with this fraudulent 1989 diagnosis.
Correct. That's right. Yeah. I mean, people still want to believe that he was diagnosed in 1989. They want to spread malicious rumors that he fought in the ring for 7 years. It's not true. There's no evidence to support that. And then you've got two people, Tony Holden and John Brown, his so-called manager, that were with him all those years. They would have known, and they flatly have come out and said that's absolutely not true. And what's sorry about this is that the case got dismissed because the commission and Quest Diagnostics used that 1989 bogus diagnosis of HIV in order to get me dismissed.
All right. So how did Tommy die?
Well, he did not die of HIV. And in order to die of AIDS, you have to have HIV.
Yeah.
It was after the 12 foot of gauze that was removed from Tommy's chest. He was sitting on the stool in our kitchen, no anesthetic, because none of us knew it was in there. His fall that night, he went head first through a wall, landing on his neck. And that was the beginning of his downfall. And the media have never mentioned this. I was there. There's a witness that was there, a nurse that was there. Although ESPN knew about it, when they did that ESPN 30 for 30, they came and interviewed me for 3 hours. I told them all about this, and they never even included any of this information in there.
Now you had the pictures of the gauze and everything that came out of him, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and they ignored this.
They totally ignored all that. This had to be just HIV because he was diagnosed with HIV in 1996, which, if they used their heads, they would now realize that nobody diagnosed him in Vegas in 1996. And any of the physicians, in fact, throughout, from 1996 to 2013, did not use a test that detected the whole virus. So, but they totally ignored all of that. Tommy's body went into septic shock after they pulled out the gauze. And he fought that septic shock for 21 months. Some people don't even survive it after a week. His blood became infected from the gauze with a bacteria called Pseudomonas. And Pseudomonas, and I want everybody to listen to this, Pseudomonas is found in soil, water, plants all over the world and in healthy people. But if it's not treated with IV antibiotics immediately, it can lead to spread all over your body and blood, and you become resistant to antibiotics. And he was never given IV antibiotics immediately. Then throughout his hospital stay, he was overdosed on potassium in one hospital, overdosed on iron in another, and he was given 2 medications at the same time that cause seizures. And the very final 2 days, he was placed in a medically induced coma because of those seizures, but he never got out of it. His heart gave way. He died of cardiac arrest. Then septic shock, septicemia, and then his organs failed, and it was listed on the death certificate in that order.
But no HIV or AIDS?
No HIV or AIDS, no.
Yeah, but ESPN didn't report that. And that looks like something that ESPN might want to report, but then again, they can't control the narrative of the story as well. And only God knows why they want to control the narrative of that statement. You want to clear up the comments made by ESPN or on ESPN by Doug Draggart about Tommy had maybe member. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what seems really important, and this is the character assassination part, Mike, is rather than state the facts about the tests and the blood and the post-mortem and the galls and the jail that Tommy went through, they would much rather give footage to somebody called Doug Draggart, who I've only met once. I didn't know him, and rest in peace, Doug Draggart, and my condolences to his widow. He didn't know me, but they gave him the opportunity to say something really bizarre, that nobody was allowed to visit or see Tommy. But that's not true. Tommy had many members of his own family visit him. In fact, I'll list them to you: his sister, his brother Timmy, his mother, his 2 sons, the mothers, Christy and Tammy, and their husbands of Tommy's 2 sons, Trey and Kenzie, his best friend from Kansas City named Mike, who actually came to the hospital and sat by his bed many times so I could go outside. His best friend drove from Florida named Eric. Tony Holden came to visit. His aunt that he used to stay and live with in Kansas City when he was, up and coming, she came twice to visit him. And then some friends that Doug Draggart didn't even know. He also had phone calls from one of his very best friends called Dale. Even though Tommy's voice box was actually paralyzed, he still tried to communicate with Dale. And then his childhood friend Andy and his wife from Jay, Oklahoma, who actually came up with the bail money, they were on the phone as well to him. The person that probably I feel the most sorry for is really his second ex-wife, who had put a restraining order on Tommy on December 7th, 2011, the day we got back from surgery, and it was never lifted. She never came with his youngest son and stepson to see Tommy, and, that's for her to live with, not me. But they spent time on trying to assassinate my character by saying, no, wait, nobody's allowed to see him. And that's not true, Mike.
So what are the chances of the petition being granted?
Well, November 16th, 2018 is when it goes to the U.S. Supreme Court in front of hopefully the 9 justices, if Justice Ginsburg is feeling up to it. That actually happens to be the same day that Rocky V came out in 1990. So, hopefully that's a good sign. When we got denied on October 1 this year, we were among over 800 other cases that got denied that day. So it's going to take some major prayers out there, positive vibes, candles lit, whatever anybody can do, and a lot less hate speech on the part of the media. That's what it's going to take.
And I would think your main reason for doing this is just to clear Tommy's name.
Absolutely. I wouldn't be doing this if I hadn't got the phone call from the experts in HIV, AIDS, and Ebola in Omaha, Nebraska, saying, Mrs. Morrison, we don't understand this, but he's negative, no virus. And I wouldn't be doing this, Mike, And then to contact Vegas, and they suddenly go, well, it wasn't me that diagnosed him, it wasn't him, it wasn't them, and then to find out that the tests don't even detect the virus. I wouldn't be doing it if this was all a waste of time. It's not a waste of time. And yes, peace was given to me the day I received that phone call. I'm at peace. But, Tommy would want the world to be at peace, to know that what he had been accused of, getting thrown out of boxing at the age of 26, just turned 27, is just, it's not right.
Yeah. I mean, it's the thing that's amazing to me is you would even have to go through this process if there is proof that there was no HIV or no AIDS. So why would it be fought like that? And that's not really a question for you, because I think that's kind of one of the questions you want to know too, is why is this happening this way? I mean, from the start, why was he tested for something nobody else was tested for? Because I think, wasn't that at a weigh-in or at a physical for his next fight when that happened in '96?
He was told he had to be tested when he got to Vegas, and actually we don't even know who drew the blood, to be honest with you, Mike. Nobody seems to know. They don't know how the blood got there. And in fact, the CEO of the lab in Vegas was one of my expert witnesses, and he wrote an affidavit saying that, that wasn't Tommy's blood. And when it came to deposing this expert witness, he disappeared. So I would assume he got bought off somehow. I assume I don't know for sure, but it just doesn't sound totally right. I know that it was the first deal with Don King in a multi-million-dollar contract to fight Mike Tyson in the third fight. Yeah. So, there's a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah, so, I mean, none of it really makes sense, because Mike Tyson versus Tommy Morrison would have done huge money. So you would think it would be hard to buy off Don King in that situation. But then again, it's Don King, so.
Right, yeah. And one other thing that I found out was that Tommy's opponent, Stormy Weathers, that he should have fought that night, he actually had a prescription from his own physician saying that he couldn't fight that night.
Stormy Weathers had that?
Yeah. Yeah, and this document came to me from the Nevada Commission. Yeah. So it's almost as though that fight was never supposed to happen, Mike.
That's the way it sounds to me.
Yeah.
And it also sounds to me like everything else happened for a reason, too. It would just be nice to know what that reason was.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But, all right. I don't even know what to say after this, Trish, because, like I said, everybody I talk to, when I tell them, well, he didn't test positive for AIDS after he passed away, they all still tell me, well, there's no doubt that he did it, though. And I'm like,
I know, that's right.
And then they tell me, well, it's a conspiracy theory. And I'm like, yeah, but if the test says that he didn't have any immune disorders, how could he have an immune disorder? And it just blows my mind how people just, whatever they see on TV, they believe. And no matter
now,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Now, there's a difference there. What you just said was that he never had any autoimmune disorders. Now, autoimmune disorders is lupus, is all diseases, disorders, totally unrelated to AIDS.
Yeah.
AIDS is different to autoimmune disorders. And if you have an autoimmune disorder, then you can test positive on a so-called HIV/AIDS test, right? But not actually have HIV. So, yeah. And the problem is that the commission never tested him for all the other stuff that could be a possibility to actually test positive, a false positive, because they believed the lab and the lab didn't tell the commission, oh, if you've got Addison's disorder, or if you've got lupus, or if you've got rheumatoid arthritis, you can test positive. But we don't know anything about Tommy Morrison because we've never seen him. We've never met him. So that's what the problem is that the commission are requiring a lab report from the lab, and then they're taking that as gospel truth, right? That person has got HIV, and which will lead to AIDS. Okay. And it's come out that a lab report is not a diagnosis. Simple as that.
Yeah. But, all right, Trish, it was great having you on the show. I hope everything goes well. What is that, Friday the 16th then?
Yeah.
Or is that Thursday? Okay.
That's right.
And maybe if everything goes all right, maybe we'll have you on next week to talk about it. Or if it doesn't, whenever you want to come on this show, you are more than welcome, because anything I can do to help clear Tommy's name, I'm willing to do.
That's wonderful, and I know he would appreciate that. Thank you very much, Mike.
All right. And for what it's worth, on that day, November the 16th, I was sitting in a movie theater at noon watching the first showing of Rocky V.
Wonderful. Well, I hope it's blasted everywhere so that all the 9 justices will see that and go, my goodness, that guy looks healthy. How could it be possible he had HIV in 1989 when that movie came out in 1990?
Yeah, because the movie would have been filmed probably in 89, correct? Or early 90?
Well, that's right. It came out in 1990 on November 16th, so pretty bizarre, isn't it?
1989 is when they filmed it. So
yeah, that's right.
He looked pretty healthy there, anyways.
Yeah, he sure did.
Hey, he never should have punched Paulie, though. I mean,
Yeah. Well, I only watched Rocky V for the first time in March of this year.
That's why I brought it up, because I saw you post about that, and I'm thinking, there's no way she's never seen Rocky V. What'd you think of the movie?
Yeah. I thought it was really good. It was bittersweet watching it because, over the years, Tommy said, hey, you remember me in this scene? And I'd look at him and he'd roll his eyes and go, oh, yeah, of course, we still need to see that movie. And then when he finally went to go get it at Blockbusters, they didn't have it. So, you just got to imagine, Tommy Gunn standing at Blockbusters trying to get his own movie and they don't have it. Yeah. Right. So I did. I finally watched it. It was really sweet. And basically it's what his life, was, right? It's very much a real life story. Yeah.
All right, Trisha. Once again, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Anything we can do to help out, you got my phone number. You call me. We'll get you on whenever you want. I want to remind everybody that next week, me, John, and Jeremiah will be back with our normal Inside Boxing Weekly show to preview all the fights coming up. I guess that's Thanksgiving weekend if there are any fights coming up. But we'll be on, and we'll talk about something either way. Remember, you can hear me and Steve Risley tomorrow on Panic Tuesday, recapping the weekend of NFL football at 1 o'clock on thegrizzlytruth.net. Tomorrow night will be the NFL Pick'em Show, also the CFL Pick'em Show with Robert Drummond, 4-time Grey Cup winner in the CFL. And just remember, you can hear us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Trisha Morrison, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.